You are listening to the Kelli Confidential podcast with Kelli Wilkes. This is episode 38. Welcome to the Kelli Confidential Show, where we talk negotiation essentials and those crucial conversations empowering extraordinary women. Real women, real issues. Let's jump in. Hi, friends, and welcome back. How's your week going so far? I hope it's warm and spring-like wherever you are, because in Britain it has been so cold. I've been in wool sweaters and ankle boots for most of the past 2 weeks. Really, in June. We need those bright sunny days and warmer temperatures to come back. So my week's been busy. I'm working on a grant application at the moment. It's a funding campaign put on each year by Innovate UK Women's Group, and I'm submitting an application for funding to support a technology expansion of my little business. It's exciting, and I can't really talk about it too much at this stage, but I hope to share more soon. Yeah, so stay tuned. And if I'm successful, it will mean far greater reach in my ability to help women move the needle forward on those important deals, whether it's a business loan, buying a house, or maybe navigating a difficult personal split or settlement. So yeah, stay tuned. Anyway, all of this requires a lot of research, which, if you know me, I totally love. I'm a stats junkie, and I love research. But admittedly, this is a lot. So I'm gathering information to support my existing research and pitch papers, and I came across a video this week of a former government profiler turned public speaker who was doing a set on, I think it was the Today Show in the US. Not recent. I think this was recorded perhaps a good few months back, but she was speaking about deception and reading body language. And I thought, oh, this is right up my alley because, again, I'm a nerd and I like this kind of stuff and it's all relevant to my business. Anyway, getting to the punchline, it wasn't good. It started off okay with the usual telltale indicators, but without the depth of explanation on how to apply what you're observing. Okay, so what do I mean? So, for example, she was saying, like, if you see a person looking to the left, they're lying to you. No, that's simply not true on its own. And in fact, why I was annoyed with this whole segment was because she spent the next 5 minutes rattling off a number of body language indicators, most of which I'm familiar with, but didn't provide the context for how you should properly and authentically interpret these so you're not jumping to conclusions. It was quite irresponsible, I thought, and just disappointing, as without that context, it's reasonable to expect that many folks watching that will run off now and accuse their spouse or boss or employee of lying. So, yeah. It's not good to make those kind of assumptions. And many of you will know that I teach negotiation strategies and techniques. It's been mostly passive, a few courses here and there over the past 6 years, shared to professionals, women's groups, and mediation students. But I'm doing it on a more targeted basis now. And my point is, not only have I been deal making throughout my career as a full-time job, but I teach it. And I specifically cover body language and how to interpret that so that individuals like you know how to navigate nonverbal cues and how to read and avoid deception, including dirty tactics. So on our show today, it's a short and punchy one. We're going to cover body language, speech, and virtual negotiations so you are better informed on how to navigate these areas in your next business deal or crucial relationship negotiation. Ready? Let's jump in. Much has been written about body language and how to interpret the different nonverbal meanings. Today, with the advancement of technology and mobile phones, virtual negotiations have found a permanent home in commercial, legal, and family mediations. And the proliferation of text, tweets, and social media apps have in theory, made today's negotiators, and young people especially, more effective at dealing with virtual deal making. Again, in theory, because the apps force them to get to the point faster, which means they have to be succinct, even when they're not trying to be. And I'll come back to that in a moment because the theory only gets you so far. But it's because of this shift in deal making to email and text. I mean, I bought a car 100% virtually. Everything was haggled over text. And I'll cover that in another episode. But anyway, the shift to virtual deal making has meant we're using our interpersonal skills less. We're engaging with people in real life less and less. And in fact, a lot of people who are confrontation averse prefer it that way. But this creates real challenges when you don't know what you're doing, or worse, you're so disconnected, i.e. from face-to-face bargaining and interpersonal conflict management, which remember, this occurs every day in life. Conflict is just everywhere, and you can't get away from it. But if you are trying to negotiate something and you're so disconnected from these interpersonal exchanges, you're not likely to pick up on the cues in front of you that may be presenting you with valuable information. So what are some of these cues? And by cues, I mean nonverbal messages which are on display. We can see these. These come in the form of the following: facial expressions, body movement and posture, gestures, eye contact, touch, space, so this is personal space, voice and volume. And within these 7, we give away signals unintentionally or intentionally, according to Freud, that can, note I didn't say will, can indicate thoughts and feelings in that moment. Thoughts and feelings like worry, anxiety, irritation, fear, discomfort, avoidance and deception, or conversely, joy and excitement. Now I hear you ask, why, Kelli, would we care about unintentionally giving away signs of joy or excitement? Well, have you ever been with someone shopping for a new car and they need to negotiate a good price, but they're simply bursting with excitement to drive it off the lot to the point it shows? Nervous giddiness, a smile busting to get out? And what does that signal to the seller? Well, in the seller's head, it's just told him or her that he doesn't need to negotiate. The deal's in the bag. Not great if you really needed them to drop the price a few $1,000s to stay in budget. So how do we manage these cues so that we get meaningful information out of it without jumping to conclusion? Well, I've done the heavy lifting for you, as this is a topic I cover regularly in my courses. Firstly, the most important part, you should only look to interpret body language based on patterns. These are called gesture clusters. This is a collection of repeated gestures or physical indicators done in cycles, done multiple times, i.e. 3 or more times to create that pattern. Why is this so important? Because the assumption that someone is lying simply for looking to the left while retelling something that happened to them is just that. It's an assumption, and it's a myth. In isolation, the diverted eye contact could mean anything. A person may be looking left because there's an odd pigeon on the windowsill behind you, or he or she may have limited attention span, or they may have something in their eye. There could be a number of reasons. So what you're looking for instead is a pattern and consistency of that pattern occurring in time with a difficult part of the conversation or a part of the conversation that may not stack up. And it's in that space where you want to pay attention to a pattern of physical signs. And those signs, those cues, according to research, show up and can be classified into the following 3 groups. Number 1, engagement actions or movements. So these are affirmative head nods, forward leaning, and clear and constant eye contact. These represent interest and agreement. Can you think of a time where someone was doing that repeatedly in a meeting with you, or maybe at a family dinner? Number 2, disagreement actions. These cues are shown through leaning back as they're listening or speaking. So this is someone that may be leaning back in their chair. Again, this could occur in a meeting. This could be at a dinner. This is also indicated through frowning, looking away repeatedly, or looking away and holding that position of looking away while you may be talking to them. This is usually an obvious sign of discord. These movements additionally indicate disinterest, annoyance, suspicion, condescension, and possibly boredom. My experience of these cues is that it's pretty accurate, especially the looking away movement. I worked with a gentleman who was very contrary a lot of the time and who had, unfortunately for him, he had very little self-awareness and self-control, hiding it. He would routinely demonstrate these cues when speaking with me or team members. And not only did it make him awkward to deal with, it made him susceptible to failed negotiations with more senior leaders who likewise sensed this discord. Because remember that people are more apt to be agreeable and say yes to who? Well, people that they like. If you're moody and negative, it comes across as condescending, and people and business leaders aren't attracted to that. And group number 3, the tension cues group. These movements are displayed as face touching, ankle locking, or ankle tapping, and the use of high vocal tones. When done in patterns or clusters together, these present clear signs of discomfort and show that your counterpart isn't satisfied with how things are being handled. It doesn't necessarily mean total disagreement like the former example, but more so a display of frustration, impatience, and unease. I'm sure you can think of a colleague or family member who's displayed these signs. It means stress. It could be as simple as needing a bathroom break after a long meeting, or something more complex like tension in discussions about employee performance. And actually, I see these tension cues the most in children. Typically when they're just ready to move on and you can see the tension growing. I think the term is called ants in their pants. But you see this a lot in kids. But don't ignore them is the point, because these cues are telling you that there's something to explore in that moment with that person. So be curious, make sure you explore that with them. The key here is to not overanalyze the nonverbal cues. So stay curious, be curious, but don't overanalyze it. Instead, look at the picture as a whole and take these indicators in context of that person's character traits to see if it sets a baseline. To do this, experts suggest you should try to establish rapport with that person when they're not under pressure. Asking questions about things you already know the answer to, or by discussing innocuous topics that are easy, non-threatening to share in friendly conversations. This is one of the reasons why I love true crime shows so much. The suspect interview scenes are fascinating and information rich. And of course, some are truly cringeworthy. And I occasionally find myself mumbling to the detective on TV that he's missed an opportunity. But most times it's like watching a masterclass in rapport building, as the investigators on some of these shows are true leaders in their field, and their ability to disarm complete strangers to gather information, or better yet, to get a confession, comes with great skill, patience, and practice. Here's an excerpt from one of my 2023 podcasts about rapport building and the myths and reality of achieving it, as taught by true crime detectives. In that show, I was talking about American true crime drama, The First 48. Now stay with me, you'll see where this is going. I'm going to share 3 examples of rapport tactics, and it will make sense. In this particular episode, which was recorded in Mobile, Alabama, the show opens with detectives getting the call and going to the scene of a crime where a victim was gunned down in cold blood. A few hours later, detectives have found the suspect, whom they have learned spent time in the military, specifically two tours of duty in Afghanistan. When they finally find him, he's at his mother's home and he refuses to come out of the house. Given his extensive military training and the unprovoked shooting of a stranger, they have to plan for the worst when trying to take him into custody. After nearly 30 tense minutes and several attempts to get him to come out of the house in the middle of the night, and the house is surrounded by police and SWAT teams, the suspect is finally coaxed over the phone by his terrified mother to give himself up. He opens the door and instructions are yelled to him from waiting police and SWAT team members to exit slowly with his hands up, which he does. Then he's told to turn around, hands up again, and walk backwards to them, where he's finally told to get on his knees before being handcuffed. And it's a really tense situation. Everyone's on edge. He's placed in handcuffs without issue. And the lead detective slowly and quietly walks him to the car, speaking in low, soft tones, where the man replies in the same low, soft tones, mirroring his police captor. This established behavior immediately diffuses the situation for the perpetrator, as well as helping to bring down the high emotions and tensions among the police force and SWAT teams. At one point, the perpetrator, let's call him Tim, can be heard saying that he needs to pee as soon as they get to wherever they're going, as he's been awakened from a deep sleep. And the lead detective is heard saying, "That's okay, man, we'll get you sorted when we get there." It's an excellent example in how to quickly and effectively diffuse emotions of any kind, and this is rapport tactic number 1, compassion. Then once in the interview room, the same lead detective together with his partner sit opposite Tim in a triangular form where no one side has more power than the other. And despite the fact they have 2 witnesses, video footage of his car speeding away from the scene, and the same car parked in the front drive of his mother's house, they don't lead with any of that. Instead, they start with telling him that he's not under arrest, but he's detained because he refused to come to the door, and they just need to ask him some questions relating to an investigation. This is rapport tactic 2, which is to disarm and put at ease. Tim then nods. His hands are crossed in his lap facing the lead detective, and the detectives then start with what I call warm-up questions. These are all questions that they already know the answers to. And I talk about this routinely in my courses. Such an important way to engage people and disarm them. Why? Because it provides people with immediate information about how this person responds when they're calm, when they're being truthful, because again, it's a topic they already know the answers to, and they're not feeling threatened. These are innocuous, safe conversations. So in this section, the investigators were just asking questions about, what he did for a living, where he was from, and all of those types of things. It allows them to calibrate his normal state so that they can spot deviations from that same normal state when they might appear. They ask where he grew up, what he does for a living, and they nod and they take notes as he talks, again disarming. Then they ask, any time in the military? Tim confirms, yes, 4 years in Afghanistan, which again they already knew, but Tim doesn't know this. The lead detective nods, pauses, and looking him in the eyes, says sincerely, "Thank you for your service." This produces an immediate change in Tim's body language, something a mix of embarrassment and surprise and a huff sound. This is rapport tactic 3, sincerity. They shortly move on to their investigation into the shooting of the man. They remind Tim of his Miranda rights, and they carry on peacefully with their interrogation to gather information. What followed was that Tim was later charged and prosecuted for the crime, but it was a much easier process for all parties because of the way the lead detectives set about rapport building. And as you can see, it's much more than small talk. Now, hopefully none of you will ever find yourselves in that sort of situation, but it's an excellent example of how rapport building, when used properly, keeps things moving and how it allows you to calibrate certain information. There are other important cues that I cover in my courses, like eye blocking and shoulder shrugging, but this was a good starter for 10. Be sure to follow me and my newsletters if you want more information of any upcoming courses. So moving on to our final segment, let's look at how to progress negotiations virtually over email and text. This is less about body language and more about nonverbal written indicators and how to navigate these to reach positive outcomes. And as I mentioned, the advent of the 140 character tweet and limited posting space on social media has, for many people, created a new generation of succinct communicators, whether they realize it or not. Knowing that, your starting point should always be to say less with more, no matter what the context, because the reader is equally tuned in to these advanced communication strings. They're all short. They're just short. So make sure you keep it simple, short, and punchy so your messages don't become boring. They need to understand what you want and what you are prepared to trade in a very short message. Here's my top 7 guide for navigating emails and texts. And if you want a detailed review of this, I covered this in a detailed segment in episode 5 last year, which was negotiating your salary. Anyway, here's my top 7 list for negotiating an email and text. Number 1. Firstly, try to meet in person or over the phone at the very least in advance to establish rapport over a safe and friendly topic. Now, this isn't always possible or desirable. Remember, I negotiated a car entirely through text. Of course, the sale transfer was contingent on the physical viewing and test drive of the car, but the deal was done up front, everything over text. Anyway, if this deal is for something really material and long-lasting, like your salary, or it might be a sales deal for a new customer that you've been trying to close for a while, you should always attempt to have at least one conversation under your belt before you start haggling with a stranger over email. Okay? Don't just discount that. It's important. So that's number 1. If it's a material, long-lasting deal that you need to close, make sure that you meet in person or at least have a phone conversation in advance before you try to haggle over text or email. Number 2, add something about yourself in the email that is unrelated to the deal at hand. This is used as an icebreaker, and this is crucial because it takes the pressure off both parties by creating a third element that momentarily attracts attention, and it just lightens everything. So examples might be talking about your dog, your kids, a recent trip, the traffic, something like that. Okay, and number 3, just like the icebreaker, you want to use humor early. Emails that start with light and genuine and appropriate humor lead to increased trust. This can be particularly effective if it's self-deprecating humor. I often share stories about the exploits of being a mom to 2 wayward dogs and the trouble it creates, usually at my expense, but often funny and always sincere. Here's an example. You could start the text with the following. How was your weekend? Mine was good. Only 5 things destroyed by the menace chewer this weekend. A 50% improvement over last weekend. So that's something really simple, easy, and sincere. Just try it, but remember to be appropriate and sincere. Again, trust me, people can tell if you're smiling on the other end of a keyboard. Number 4, state your emotions explicitly and check in with your counterpart. And here's a tip. If you express it as a feeling or a sense, it's immediately disarming. It makes it difficult to argue with because people, they can argue against positions, but it's very difficult to argue against feelings because they're your feelings and nobody else can be an expert on those but you. Use of feelings is a great connector, whether in person or done virtually. Here are a few examples. I'm feeling impatience on your end. Are you able to share more? Or, I sense my proposal frustrated you. Is that right? Or, this feels like it's on the right track. Are you able to tweak X, Y, and Z? So those are just some examples. And number 5, when preparing a counteroffer, This again is through email or text. When preparing a counteroffer, be sure to read your email or text aloud in a negative or angry tone, right? So you're going to read it aloud to yourself, but in an angry tone, to see if you still want to send it. Why? Because it will immediately show you if your text actually sounds negative or angry, or if it just sounds silly when you read it aloud in a negative or angry tone. Leave it, redraft it, and repeat until you're clear and confident that it's positive and polite, and that it will land well and won't offend anybody. Number 6, on that same point, if you're already angry, never send an email. Never send an email when you're angry. The anger will pierce from the page and you won't get the opportunity back. Trust me, this will not serve you. And even I've had so many conversations with people about this when they're in a virtual negotiation and they don't like the terms or the offer. And they write an angry response and they delete a few bits here and there, and then they rewrite it and then they rewrite it. It's just not going to work. You need to just leave it alone. So the advice is just avoid it. If you're upset, go take a walk, go get a drink of water, leave it for half an hour, come back, review item 5, read it aloud, repeat, and then send your email. It needs to be polite and positive. Those are the keys. And number 7, be curious. Always be curious. This is such a great tool for any negotiator. Ask questions from the start. This shows interest and concern. This is so effective. And remember the investigator tactics from the Mobile, Alabama Police Department? They asked a lot of questions early on. Sincere questions. It creates rapport. Try it. And there you have it. It was short, but hopefully you'll agree it was information-packed. We covered body language, nonverbal cues, and virtual negotiations, and all will pay dividends, individually or combined, on your next business deal or crucial negotiation. Good luck, and be sure to drop me a note to let me know how you get on. And just before I leave, if you're a new mediator, social worker, or considering a career in that field, I'm running a special one-day program this October at Jesus College, Oxford. This is the 4th year I've run this module, and it's the 3rd time at Jesus College. It's a great day and a great learning experience. Details about the course are in the show notes. If you enjoy these episodes and you want to learn more, be sure to give us a like and follow us. And leave me a review. It takes time and energy to do these shows. I do them for you, and I can't do it without your help. Thanks for following. Until next time.